The congressional evolution of the United States leadership begins with Peyton Randolph of Virginia. Randolph was elected the first president of the United Colonies Continental Congress, serving in what is commonly referred to as the First Continental Congress from September 5th to October 21st, 1774, at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia. Randolph was born in Williamsburg, Virginia on September 20th, 1721, as the second son of Sir John and Lady Susanna Randolph. At 4 years old, the family moved into the now national landmark wooden home on Market Square in the center of Williamsburg. Sir Randolph, Peyton's father, was one of Virginia's most distinguished attorneys, also serving as a Speaker of the House of Burgesses. But he died when Peyton was only 16 years old, leaving the house and other personal property for him in trust with his mother. Peyton attended the College of William and Mary, and after graduation, he was admitted into the Middle Temple Inn of the Court in London, England, on October 13, 1739, to study law. After 4 years of scholarship, Peyton was admitted to the bar in London on February 10, 1743. At 21, he returned to Williamsburg, and on May 7, 1744, he was appointed to his father's former office, the Virginia Colonies Attorney General, by Governor William Gooch. On March 8, 1746, Randolph married Betty Harrison, and on July 21st, he was admitted to private practice of law in York County, and in 1747 became a vestryman of the Bruton Parish Church in Williamsburg. In 1748, he was appointed King's Attorney for Virginia, elected to represent Williamsburg in the House of Burgesses, and in 1749 became a Justice of the Peace. As the King's Attorney in 1749, Randolph challenged Reverend Samuel Davis's attempt to expand Presbyterianism into Virginia under the 1769 British Act of Tolerance. The case eventually was appealed by Davis before the Attorney General in England, and in 1751, a ruling in Randolph's favor was applied not only to Virginia, but all the British colonies in North America. Randolph would gain further prominence in the colonies when he challenged Virginia Governor Robert Dinwiddie's decision to impose a pistole fee, a Spanish crown worth about 20 shillings, for certifying land patents in the colony of Virginia. As a member of the House of Burgesses, Randolph shirked his duty to the royal crown, and against Governor Dinwiddie's direct orders, he traveled to England to argue his case against the pistole fee before the British Privy Council. Dinwiddie immediately removed Randolph from his position of King's Attorney, but the council ruled, and I quote, that the governor should take a fee upon every patent containing 100 acres or upwards of lands below the Allegheny Mountains, that all lands beyond the Allegheny Mountains should be granted out upon the usual fees. The council also noted that the king would have no objection to Peyton Randolph's reinstatement if he apologized. Upon returning to Virginia and apologizing to the governor, he was reinstated to his former position. In 1775, he was elected Burgess for the College of William and Mary, and in 1757 joined the college board, serving as rector for 1 year. In 1761, he was elected Burgess of Williamsburg, and by 1764, his leadership abilities propelled him into the chair of a Burgess Committee assigned the task to draft protests to the King, the House of Lords, and the House of Commons against the Stamp Act, insisting on the colony's exclusive right of self-taxation. As chair, Randolph and Patrick Henry, who radically opposed the Stamp Act, locked horns over the language, but Henry carried 5 of his radical resolutions by a single ballot. Thomas Jefferson, standing at the chamber's door, reported Peyton Randolph emerged from the house saying, "By God, I would have given 100 guineas for a single vote." Peyton Randolph was elected Speaker of the House of Burgesses on November 6, 1776, defeating the Liberal faction's candidate, Richard Henry Lee. During his service, the Burgesses had recognized that his legal knowledge and judicial calmness were a ballast for the passionate Virginia patriotism of the persuasive Patrick Henry, Lee, and their supporters. In May of 1769, the House considered measures to counteract the England township duties. Once again, Patrick Henry introduced the radical resolves, but this time Speaker Randolph supported the measure. An enraged Virginia governor disapproved and dissolved the assembly. The following day, the members gathered at Raleigh Tavern and adopted a compact drafted by George Mason, that was introduced by George Washington. Peyton Randolph surprised everyone by insisting that he be the first to sign as the Speaker of the former representatives of the people. Virginia's plight was not uncommon, as the American legislatures were being indiscriminately dissolved by the other colonial governors. In 1772, at the urging of Samuel Adams, Massachusetts formed a committee of correspondence that would ignite formal collaboration between the British colonies. These committees were formed throughout the colonies as a method of coordinating grievances against the king. Some were formed by the colonial legislatures, while others by private associations such as the Sons of Liberty. It was this Boston committee that directed the Boston Tea Party action of December 16, 1773. On May 24, 1774, the House of Burgesses adopted a Thomas Jefferson resolution supporting the oppressed people of Boston. And on May 26, Virginia Governor Dunmore dissolved the House of Burgesses. On May 27, 1774, a group of 89 Burgesses gathered at the Raleigh Tavern to form another non-importation association. And the following day, the Committee of Correspondence proposed adopting New York's May 23rd call for a Congress of Deputies from the colonies in general in a letter written by John Jay. On August 1st, the Virginia Colonial Convention assembled, with Randolph presiding, and approved the ban on all exports to Great Britain. The convention also appointed Randolph and 6 other deputies to what would become the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. The other delegates were Edmund Pendleton, Richard Bland, Benjamin Harrison, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, and George Washington. The first meeting of colonial representatives took place at the City Tavern on September 1st, 1774, just down the street from the Philadelphia State House, with no delegates present from Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New York, or Georgia. It was agreed to reassemble on September 5th, and John Adams wrote in part in his diary, Monday at 10, the delegates all met at City Tavern and walked to Carpenter's Hall, where they took a view of the room and of the chamber where there is an excellent library. The general cry was that this was a good room, and it passed in the affirmative. A very few were for the negative. The first order of business for the delegates after the presentation of credentials was the election of a presiding officer. Delegate James Duane wrote in his notes on the debates, Mr. Lynch proposed that we should elect a president or chairman and name Mr. Peyton Randolph Speaker of the Assembly of Virginia, who was unanimously approved and placed in the chair. A question was then put to what title the convention should assume, and it was agreed that it should be called a Congress. Another question was put, what should be the style of Mr. Randolph, and it was agreed that he should be called President. President Randolph then presided over the election of a secretary, and Delegate Lynch nominated Charles Thompson, who was strongly supported by Benjamin Franklin. And despite being known as the Samuel Adams of Philadelphia, Thompson was elected unanimously. Thompson would serve in this position in both Continental Congresses and in the United States in Congress assembled for nearly 15 years. On September the 6th, the rules of conduct to be observed in debating and determining questions were adopted by Congress. A committee was formed to state the rights of the colonies in general, and another committee was charged with examining and reporting the several statutes that affect trade and manufacture in the colonies. The following day, Congress commenced with a prayer led by the Reverend Duché, and then began to form additional committees. The delegates then passed an important resolution empowering President Randolph, and I quote, to adjourn the Congress from day to day when he finds no business prepared to be laid before them, and may, when he finds it necessary, call them together before the time to which they may have adjourned, unquote. On September the 17th, the Massachusetts Suffolk Resolves were delivered to Congress by Paul Revere, and the following day they were endorsed by Congress as a show of colonial solidarity. Congress also ordered the resolution along with the resolves to be published in the newspapers. Delegate Joseph Galloway, the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House, introduced his plan of union on September 28th when Congress was in the midst of a debate on the subject of the means most proper to be used for a restoration of American rights. According to John Adams, Galloway spoke at length on this plan, which proposed the creation of an American colonial parliament to act together with the Parliament of Great Britain on North American matters. He also noted that James Duane, John Jay, and Edward Rutledge supported Galloway's plan. This plan of union, however, never came to a formal vote before Congress. On October 10, 1774, a letter was issued to the military governor of Massachusetts, General Gage, concluding, quote, "We hope, sir, you will discontinue the fortifications in and about Boston, prevent further invasion of private property, refrain the irregularities of the soldiers, and give orders that the communication between town and country may be open, unmolested, and free. Signed on behalf of the General Congress, Peyton Randolph, President." A forgotten but very important measure passed by the delegates occurred on October 14, 1774, when Congress passed its Declaration of Rights and Resolves. Drafted by John Adams, who would later sit on the Committee of Five that drafted the Declaration of Independence, this lengthy resolution begins, and I quote, "That the inhabitants of the English colonies in North America, by the immutable laws of nature, the principles of English Constitution, and the several charters and compacts, have the following rights. First, resolved, that they are entitled to life, liberty, and property, and they have never ceded to any sovereign power whatever a right to dispose of either without their consent." End quote. The next measure, the Articles of Association resolution that scholars maintain to be the most important measure of this Congress, was adopted by the delegates on October 20th in response to the intolerable acts the British government had imposed on its subjects in the colonies. These rather radical articles pledged that the Continental Congress member British colonies would not import any articles of commerce whatsoever from Great Britain and Ireland beginning in December. The delegates also agreed to break off dealings with any colony that failed to join the association or violate its articles. With the passage of this resolution, Peyton Randolph resigned the presidency of Congress and began his journey back to Williamsburg to preside over the Virginia House. The House of Burgesses never formed, but on November 9th, Peyton Randolph accepted the official delivery of the Continental Congress's Articles of Association, which was signed by him as the Speaker and nearly 500 merchants who had gathered in Williamsburg. 4 months later, on March 23, 1775, the Second Virginia Convention met in Richmond and elected Randolph chair. It was here that Patrick Henry rose and made his liberty or death speech supporting the formation of a Virginia militia. The convention prompted Virginia Governor Dunmore to remove the gunpowder from Williamsburg's magazine on April 21st. And Randolph was one of the leaders that dispersed the mob scene gathered at the courthouse in protest of the gubernatorial order. In May of 1775, Peyton Randolph returned to Philadelphia to attend the Second Continental Congress as a delegate for the colony of Virginia. This is Stanley Yavna Close on the Congressional Evolution of the United States of America for President Peyton Randolph.